Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. Thank you for stopping right here on my space today. I share sewing videos and pattern drafting right here on my channel. So in today's tutorial, I'll be quickly sharing with you all how I made this beautiful ruffle skirt you see right here. There are actually two ways you can achieve these ruffles at the size of your skirt. You can make use of an elastic, or you can fix a drawstring to this. But in this particular one, I made use of an elastic, and I'm going to be sharing with you all how I fixed it from the drafting to the cutting. So you'll be needing all your necessary measurements like your waist circumference, your hip length, your hip circumference, and your skirt length. So without much ado, I'll just get started with today's tutorial. So right here I'm working with this black crepe fabric, and I have about 3 yards of this fabric right here, but I'll not be making use of everything. But reason I'm working with 3 yards is because I want a very full effect at the two sides of the skirt as instructed by my client. So that's basically why I went ahead to make use of 3 yards. So I'm going to get started by spreading out this my fabric and folding it into two. I'm going to measure out my hip circumference divided by 4, which is 9.5 inches, and from that point as well I'll go ahead to mark extra 9 inches. So the excesses or the allowance I had at the side was actually much. I had to fold this a bit more, so I went ahead to also measure out what I had from my hip circumference divided by 4. All I needed in total was about 9 inches for the side ruffles. Okay, so when I achieved that, I went ahead to draw a straight line from the top of this my fabric. So this straight line I drew right here is going to serve as my waistline. So all my measurements are going to be starting from there. My waist circumference divided by 4 is 7.5 inches. I made a point right there, and from that line I marked my hip length of 9 inches. So I'm going to also mark my hip circumference divided by 4 on exactly that line right there. As you can see, I made a point right there. So I'm now going to impute the length of this my skirt. So the length of the skirt I'm working with right here is 28 inches. So you are going to multiply that by 2. So if you are working with a skirt length of 20 multiplied by 2, and whatever you have will be your skirt length, because by the time we fix an elastic, it's going to drag it up. So let's continue. We're definitely going to understand everything during the process. So I went ahead to connect from my waist to my hip, and after that I'm going ahead now to mark out the length of this my skirt. So owing to the fact that this my table wasn't so big to accommodate this fabric, I had to measure out about 28 inches, and I made a point right there. I shifted this my fabric because I'm going to be placing that 28 inches right there. I made that mark right there, and I'm going to measure out again. So at this point I marked 48 inches. I'll also drag this to also get my 56 inches. Okay, and please do note that while doing this, I already subtracted 2 inches from my skirt length, which is going to serve as my band. Okay, so when I got to the 56 inches, I added extra 1 inch, which is going to serve as my hemming allowance, and I ruled out my stretch ruler, as you can see right here. So the next I'm simply going to do now is to go back to the top part of this my skirt, and I'm going to measure out what I have right there on my hip. So whatever I have on my hip, I'll bring it all the way down to my full length. So I'd advise, if you're working with this type of fabric, you should actually draft or cut out on the floor, because this actually stressed me a whole lot because my table wasn't big enough to accommodate this fabric. So if your fabric is way bigger than your table, I'd advise honestly to do this on the floor. I would have done this on the floor actually, but just for the course of this tutorial I had to do it on my table. So like I said earlier, I'm going to measure out what I have on my hip, and you can see it's 9.5 inches, and I'm going to mark it all the way to the full length of this skirt.
To the city streets we began to feel the fire. We ride.
So honestly, this fabric really stressed me a lot, but at the end of the day I conquered. So after marking that to the full length, I went ahead now to mark 9 inches from that point right there, which is going to serve as the ruffles for the side of my skirt. So I'm going to mark this 9 inches by making sure I place my tape on exactly where my measurement stopped, so that it can have an accurate shape. Okay, So like I said earlier, this fabric kept slipping off this table and it kept giving me so much troubles, but I still achieved what I wanted by the end of the day. So after marking out these 9 inches right here, I'll simply go ahead now to come up by half of an inch from my waistline. So this is going to serve as the joining allowance to my band. So after marking all of that, I'll go ahead now and cut this out because we are done drafting this skirt. So on that part exactly where my waist circumference stopped, I'm going to notch it. Reason is because you all know that these chalk marks I made right here only took effect on one part of the fabric, so it didn't reflect to the other side. So this notch will help me know exactly where my waist circumference stopped. So after that, I just went ahead to cut out the sides exactly the way I drafted. And do know that this part I'm marking this chalk is actually the right side because all the stitches will be made at the right side. So after cutting this out, I went ahead to fold another fabric, and from the edge of the folded fabric, I'm going to start off by marking 1 inch dots, as you can see right here. So this 1 inch is going to serve as my zip allowance. So I'm going to get this my already drafted front piece and place it on this other folded fabric. So I'm going to fold, making sure that it starts from the 1 inch marks which I made on the other fabric, and I'll go ahead and pin this all around. So watch carefully, you definitely understand everything I'm doing right here. I also went ahead to cut out the sides, and also when I get to that my waist, I'm going to notch that area because I also want to get my waist reflected on my back skirt. Okay, so you can see I will notch this and I'll just keep this aside. So the next I'll be working on is on that same waist area. I'm going to notch this. So while notching this, I made a slight mistake by notching about 1 inch. Please, while doing yours, notch about half of an inch. So I'll be explaining later why I told you all I made a mistake. So now back to the zipper area. I'm going to create a zipper. Okay, here is actually a butt curve, right? So I normally do this on my channel, how to create a butt curve on your skirt or the lower part of your gown. So you, from the waist, you go down by 5 inches and use your curve rule to connect very well this way. So I actually used the free hand to do this particular one because this wasn't going to be really fitted on my client. Okay, so just come down by 5 inches, connect this way and curve it out the other way and just cut through, but don't cut exactly on the 1 inch. Leave about half of an inch away from the chalk mark made. So I cut this all the way down to the very end of this skirt. So you can see I kept using this my ruler and my power bank to hold this fabric because it was really slippery. So it's very slippery, but that's by the way. So now I'm done cutting and all of that. I'm going ahead now to remove all of these pins. So I'm going to spread out my front skirt part. I'm going to spread it out because I'm going to start working with it right here. As the chemicals they take us. So this is it. Please just ignore the fact that this kept slipping off this table and concentrate on everything that we're doing right here. So I went ahead to retake the measurement on the sides, which I'm using as my ruffles, and it's actually 9 inches. So now from that cut I made, I'm going to fold like this by half of an inch. So this is like the ruffle part of the skirt, right? So I'm going to fold it like this and stitch this. So fold it and stop exactly where the points where you notch stopped. So you can see right here I did it for both the front and for the back. So right here now is the back part of this skirt, and you're going to place them wrong sides facing each other. Make sure that the part where the chalk marks you are made is at the right side of your fabric, irrespective of the fact that you can't really differentiate the front parts, the right side and the wrong side of this fabric, but you have to choose one side that will be your right side of your fabric. I hope you understand. So I went ahead to pin all of these to align properly. So after pinning, I'm just simply going to run a stitch on exactly this chalk line which I made right here. So from the beginning all the way to the end. So for the other side, which doesn't have any chalk marks on it, what I'm simply going to do is I'll pin the waist for the front and the basket, and I'll also pin the sides as well. So before stitching, or before you run a stitch on top at the right side, all you are going to do is to measure the inches of your ruffles. So my ruffles is 9 inches, and from that cut I made right there, I started measuring 9 inches. So this is going to be very helpful to you. So you're going to measure the inches you mark for your ruffles from the end of your ruffles to your waist. So this is typically what I did right here, because I didn't want to go all over tracing out everything I had on the other side. So just do this and you are definitely getting exactly your measurements. So you're going to do this at the two sides all the way to the end. Please, you are stitching at the right side of your fabric on top of it, okay? So I'm going to do this and I'll show you what I have after stitching. So I've stitched this at the both sides, and this my skirt was very long at this point, but that's by the way. Now I'll measure out what I have on my waist, and I'm working with a waist of 31 inches, and I am going to cut out a band right here. So I measured out what I have right here, and I went ahead to bring this piece. I'll fold this piece into two. So my waist divided into two is about 15 and quarter, right? Yes. So I went ahead to place it right there. I divided it into two, and I marked what I got right there and added extra half of an inch. And for the wideness of this band, I went ahead to mark just 5 inches. So by the time I fold this my band into two, I'll be having about 2.5 inches. So notch the two midpoints, spread this band out and fold into two. So you can actually iron your interface into this, but I didn't iron mine. So folding this into two, you can see that I have 2.5 inches. So basically the notch I made on my waist on my skirt was much, so it really affected the inches I took from my band. So please do make sure that the notch you make right there is about half of an inch. So I'm going to fold this my skirt into two to get the middle, and I notched that. So I'll spread it out and I'll get my band, and I'm going to make sure that the notch part of my band is placed directly on this notch part on the center of my skirt. So normally I was supposed to use half of an inch to stitch my band to my skirt, but I ended up using about 1 inch, thereby decreasing the length of my band, or the wideness of my band, okay? Because while stitching, you have to ensure that you stitch up the notch which you made so that it looks neat and your skirt doesn't start tearing from that point. So if this is something a bit confusing to you, you have nothing to worry about, because while doing this, you definitely understand everything I'm saying right here. So I went ahead to stitch down my band to my skirt, and at this point you go ahead to fold the two sides separately and also hem the base. But I didn't fold the two sides of mine because I want to weave the two sides, okay? So I'll fix that and show you what I have. So you can see that the wideness of my band reduced here. So I went ahead as well to also fix my zipper after that, and you can see what I have right here. So I was just trying to show you all how I was able to do this by taking extra inches from my band in order to make sure I stitch up the notch. So that aside, now from this chalk line I made, from the line I'm going to mark about 3/4 of an inch, and the same way I made the straight stitch on the first line, I'm also going to make a straight stitch. So this line is going to act as a channel which will create a space for me to fix my elastic. So because I was working with an elastic of half of an inch, that was why I marked 3/4, so that my elastic can easily pass through It's not going to be too big and it's not going to be too tight on that. So you can also see I hemmed the base of my skirt. So here's the elastic I'm working with. So if you've not forgotten in a hurry, remember I told you that the skirt length I'm working with right here is 28 inches. So I multiplied it into 2. So to cut out my elastic, I'm actually going to cut out the exact length of my skirt. So reason is for this skirt to stop exactly on the length of my skirt, which is 28 inches. So by the time I use this my elastic and pass it through this channel I created, this skirt is going to come to 28 inches. Okay, so you can see how I use my safety pin to pin this, and I'm going to start passing this through. So if you're working with an elastic of 1 inch, I'd advise you mark about 1.25 inches away from the first line you made, so that your elastic can pass freely.
Tired. The night's young, and it's just begun. As she puts her hand in mine, we wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
You're going to use your pin to hold this down. So for my elastic, I removed extra about 1.5 inches. As you can see right there, I measured it out because I wanted this to kind of gather more. Okay, so I'm going to do this for the 2 parts, and I went ahead to measure what I had. So my skirt reduced by about 1/2 inch because of the extra 1 inch I removed from my elastic. I hope you're understanding the trick right here. So I'm going to double stitch just at this point I showed you right here, and after I did that, this was the end result for the 2 sides of my skirts, and that was actually how I did this. So the next I'll go ahead to do is to weave the ruffles at the sides of this my skirts, and c'est fini. That's like the end of this tutorial, and that was how I achieved these beautiful skirts which you see right here. So thank you all so much, and if you come this far watching me and you're yet to subscribe, please kindly use on that subscribe button and subscribe to this channel in order for you to get more updates on intriguing sewing tutorial videos and ideas. Thank you all so much once more, and that will be all for today. See you next time on the same channel, and I hope you try this out. Bye.